At 30,000 feet, everything was normal until it wasn't, and in seconds, everything changed. When both pilots suddenly went silent, fear took control of the cabin. No one expected the only hope left to be someone they didn't trust. A 12-year-old girl stood up in the middle of chaos, but would they believe her in time? Because when lives were on the line, doubt could cost everything. 30,000 feet above the ground, everything was under control until it was. Within seconds, both pilots went silent. The cockpit, once filled with calm precision, turned into a place of fear. Passengers had no idea their lives were now hanging by a thread. But what happened next wasn't just an emergency, it revealed something far deeper. Because the one person who stepped forward wasn't supposed to be trusted, not because of skill. Not because of courage, but because of who she was. So how did a 12-year-old black girl become the only hope in the sky, and why did no one believe in her until it was almost too late? It was supposed to be just another flight. 12-year-old Amara sat quietly by the window, her eyes fixed on the endless stretch of clouds below. Flying had always fascinated her. The sounds, the movement, the idea that something so heavy could glide so effortlessly through the sky. While most kids her age watched movies or played games, she paid attention to every announcement, every detail. It was the one place she felt completely in control, even as a passenger. Across the aisle, a few passengers had already noticed her curiosity. Some smiled politely. Others exchanged quiet glances, unsure what to make of the quiet, observant girl who seemed a little too focused for her age. It wasn't new. Amara was used to being underestimated or overlooked entirely. But today felt different. Subtle tension lingered in the air, small things most people ignored, a delay before takeoff. A brief, uneasy tone in the pilot's voice, and then a moment of silence that lasted just a little too long. Amara noticed, she always did. What she didn't know yet was that this quiet flight was about to turn into something no one on board was prepared for, and she would be at the center of it. At first, it was just a feeling. A shift so subtle most passengers didn't notice it, but Amara did. The hum of the engine sounded different, uneven, almost strained. Then came the silence. No updates. No reassuring voice from the cockpit, just a growing tension that spread like a ripple through the cabin. Minutes passed. Then a flight attendant hurried down the aisle, her calm expression barely hiding the panic in her eyes. She knocked on the cockpit door once, then again, harder this time. No response. That's when the whispers started. Something was wrong. Passengers began unbuckling their seatbelts, craning their necks, trying to understand what was happening. A man near the front stood up, his voice rising as he demanded answers. The flight attendant tried to reassure everyone, but her words felt rehearsed, fragile, like they could break at any moment. Amara watched it all, her chest tightening. She had seen enough, read enough to recognize the signs. This wasn't normal. Something had happened inside that cockpit. Then suddenly the door cracked open. For a split second, everything froze. One of the pilots slumped sideways, completely unresponsive. The other wasn't moving at all. A gasp swept through the cabin like a wave. Panic exploded, people shouted, some cried, others reached for their phones as if recording the moment would somehow make it less real. The plane, once steady, gave a slight, unsettling dip, and just like that, the unthinkable became real. No one was flying the plane. The flight attendant's voice trembled as she called out, asking if anyone on board had flight experience. A few passengers exchanged nervous glances, but no one stepped forward. The weight of the situation was crushing. This wasn't a simulation, this wasn't a story. This was life or death. Amara felt her heart pounding. She knew what those controls looked like. She understood more than most people would expect, but as she slowly stood up, something else hit her, not fear of failure, but fear of being dismissed. "I can help," she said. At first, no one even reacted. Then a man nearby let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Another shook his head, pulling his child closer. The flight attendant hesitated, her eyes scanning Amara from head to toe, not seeing skill, not seeing knowledge, just a young black girl standing in the middle of chaos. The silence that followed said everything. It wasn't just doubt, it was dismissal. Amara felt it, sharp and familiar, the same look she had seen before. The same unspoken judgment that told her who people thought she was, and who they believed she could never be. Meanwhile, the plane dipped again, harder this time. Screams filled the cabin, the urgency was undeniable now. Seconds mattered, lives were on the line, but still no one moved, no one chose her. And as the aircraft trembled in the sky, one terrifying question hung over everyone on board. What happens when the only person who might save you is the one you refuse to trust? The plane dropped again, sharper this time, violent enough to send a wave of screams crashing through the cabin. Oxygen masks trembled above, threatening to fall. The illusion of control was gone. This was real and it was happening fast. The flight attendant looked around, her composure finally breaking. No trained pilot, no backup, just fear and seconds slipping away. Amara stepped forward again, her voice stronger now. She didn't shout, she didn't beg, she just stood there steady, certain. I know what to do. But the hesitation came back, heavier than before. Eyes locked on her, not with hope but doubt. A man near the front shook his head, louder this time, refusing to believe. Another passenger pulled back, as if trusting her was more dangerous than the situation itself. And then it happened. The plane lurched violently to one side, luggage burst from overhead bins. A child cried out, someone hit the floor. The cabin tilted just enough for everyone to feel it, the terrifying edge between survival and disaster. The flight attendant turned back toward Amara, panic now replacing hesitation. There were no more options left, no more time to question, to doubt, to judge, just a choice. Trust her or lose everything. Their eyes met for a split second, and in that moment something shifted, not because of her age, not because of who she was, but because of the quiet certainty she carried when no one else could. The flight attendant stepped aside. Amara moved. Each step toward the cockpit felt heavier than the last, as every eye followed her, not with confidence but disbelief. The same disbelief she had faced her whole life, now standing between life and death. She reached the controls, sat down, hands hovering for just a second, one breath, then another. The chaos behind her didn't stop, the fear didn't fade, but none of that mattered now. Because in that moment, 30,000 feet above the ground, with everything on the line, the people who refused to believe in her had no choice but to put their lives in her hands. The shaking didn't stop right away, the fear didn't disappear, but something changed. Slowly, almost impossibly, the plane steadied. The sharp drops softened into controlled movement. The violent tilts gave way to balance, and the chaos that had consumed the cabin moments ago began to quiet, not because the danger was gone, but because somehow control had returned. Minutes passed like hours, every eye remained fixed forward, every breath held, until finally the wheels met the runway, hard but safe. A wave of silence swept through the plane before it broke into something else, relief, disbelief, emotion too heavy for words. Some passengers cried. Others sat frozen, trying to process what had just happened. And at the center of it all was Amara, the same girl they had doubted, the same voice they had ignored, now the reason they were alive. But even as people looked at her differently, something about it felt incomplete, because it shouldn't have taken a life-or-death moment for them to see her. It shouldn't have required proof at 30,000 feet for her to be trusted on the ground. For Amara, this wasn't just about flying a plane. It was about something far more familiar, the weight of being underestimated, the quiet fight to be seen beyond assumptions, beyond bias, beyond fear. And that's what stays long after the landing. Because this story isn't just about one flight. It's about how quickly doubt can turn into dependence, and how often people are judged not by what they can do, but by who others believe they are. So the question is, how many more times will someone have to prove their worth before we learn to see it from the start?